Good evening and welcome to the Meet the Saline City Council Candidates Forum. I'm Tran Longmore from the Saline Post. Thanks for attending this forum tonight, which will be broadcast several times on SCTN, Channel 18, on Comcast, and it will also be posted on the internet for people to watch later. Between now and November 3rd, City of Saline voters will elect 3 people to 2-year terms on Saline City Council. Candidates are Lee Burgoyne, Jack Zio, Heidi McClelland, and Linda Terhar. Tonight we meet the candidates seeking to represent the City of Saline. And we'll start by giving the candidates a chance to introduce themselves and tell us why they're running. I will then ask 6 questions of the candidates, and they will have 90 seconds to answer each question. During this first section of the forum, members of the public can write questions on cards and submit them here to this table. And during the second section of the forum tonight, we'll ask those questions too. Once we've exhausted these questions, or at 8:50 p.m., we'll give the candidates a chance to make final remarks for 2 minutes each. So let's get started. And we're going to start with Lee Burgoyne on question 1. Question 2, we'll go over to the right with Jack Zio to start. So the first question, we'll start with Lee, and that question is this. Many voters, especially voters with fixed incomes.
Excuse me, aren't we giving our
introductory
sorry,
remarks? Yes. Thanks for clearing that up. So we'll start with opening remarks, and we'll start with Lee Burgoyne.
Okay. All right, well first, thanks to the media and my colleagues for doing this. I'm Lee Burgoyne, I'm a former city councilman.
Put your microphone on.
Pardon me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, if you look, talk closer.
I'm Lee Burgoyne, former member of City Council. I'm seeking to continue public service. That's why I'm running. My goals are open government with accountability to the community and lower city taxes, which have doubled over the past 10 to 20 years. My background is I'm married for almost 35 years to Sheila Collins Burgoyne, with 2 kids who went through our excellent Saline area schools. Our entire family has done many years of volunteer work in Saline, including the Celtic Festival, Kiwanis Club, Saline Area Social Service, Saline Resource Council, Saline Main Street, the Rotary Club, and American Legion. My work history is that I started as an electrical engineer, went into the U.S. military as an officer in the Vietnam War. I'm an alumnus of the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. I was a successful business owner for 15 years, and then did about 30 years of local government and administration, finance, and economic development. In Saline, my accomplishments are the parking lots that brought in Max, Acadian Seafood, plus others to fill empty storefronts. I did activities that supported our schools. I was the key person that brought in more than half of the new industries into the community. And I did the 5-year financial plan for the city.
All right. Thanks, Lee. Just to let you guys know on the panel there, when I raise this, the yellow card, that means there's 15 seconds left. And then when I raise the red card, it means time's up. All right. Okay, so we'll go next with Jack.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming this evening. My name is Jack Zio. Actually, my name appears on the ballot as John Zio Jr., just so there's no confusion. I'm 67 years old. I have a wife, Pam, of 40 years, and 2 grown children, John and Christina, and their spouses, Crystal and Andrew. John and Crystal have given us 2 wonderful grandsons who we greatly enjoy. Right now I work as the co-manager of the Washtenaw County 800 megahertz radio consortium, managing about 2,300 radios and 7 tower sites for public safety around Washtenaw County. My experience in education, I have an MBA from Eastern Michigan University that I earned in 1983. Prior to that, I received a Bachelor's of Science in Public Speaking in 1969. I'm a past member of the Saline Board of Education for about 7 years. I'm a current member of the Saline Planning Commission. I'm a current member of the Saline Zoning Board of Appeals. I'm the retired Deputy Chief of Police for the Saline Police Department, where I worked from 1999 through 2011. I'm also the retired Deputy Chief of Police from the City of Ann Arbor Police Department, where I worked from 1972 through 1999, working my way up through the ranks. I also served in the U.S. Army, leaving there after 3 years with the rank of captain in the Military Police Corps. And the reason I'm running, I was raised by a family who believed in community service as an obligation of citizenship. And I believe in that same idea. I think that we need leadership with the kind of experience and common sense that I feel that I possess to help our community face the challenges we now see coming. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jack. Heidi?
Hi, everyone. I'm Heidi McClelland, and thanks for coming tonight. I am 41 years old. I'm a downtown resident, and I'm really excited about running for City Council. I've lived in Saline for over 20 years, about 22 actually, and then I just appreciate all that the city has to offer its residents, and my family and we take advantage of that. I have a husband, Scott, and my 3 kids, Quinn, who's 13, my daughter, who's 12, Avery, and Kaylee, who's 10, and they all go to Saline schools, and we are thankful for the schools in the city as well. I am a photographer and a small business owner in Saline. Have owned my own business my photography business for about 4 years now, and I also run an interior design business, and that's about 10 years. I volunteer for the city, and I believe in volunteering for the city and for the schools and everything else, but I've done just a little sampling. I've been the Kinderplatz chairperson. I'm a member of the Arts and Culture Committee. I'm on this Saline 150-year task force. I'm a member of the Saline Main Street design team, and just Saline Main Street in general, volunteering. I helped facilitate the student art banners that you see downtown. I volunteer at the schools as well. Not currently doing any PTA work, but was vice president, president of PTAs and preschool. And then I also help on the Foundation for Saline Area Schools. And I believe in fiscal responsibility, and I also believe, again, that service is key to any great city, and that working together as a community makes Saline a vibrant place to live and work.
All right, thank you. Linda?
Thanks. I'm Linda Terhar, and as people who know me well will recognize, I'm not really comfortable giving a whole lot of biographical information about myself, so you won't hear a lot about me and my history, my background right now. Feel free to ask me for details in person. But I do want to say, citizens, I believe, have a responsibility to contribute in their communities, and there are many such opportunities in Saline. After giving the matter some thought before filing to be a candidate for council again this year, I decided that serving as a council member is one of the ways I can contribute effectively to my community. My priorities for my work on City Council are working respectfully and constructively with council colleagues, city staff, and Saline citizens, maintaining and enhancing the city's ability to provide essential services, and anticipating and planning for longer-term challenges, especially financial and infrastructure needs, and maintaining Saline's character as a superb place to live and work. At the beginning of my now nearly 5 years as a city council member, when people asked me what it was like, I said often, every moment is a learning opportunity. That was a lighthearted way of saying something very important and true, and something that is still very true for me today. Even though I've learned a great deal in 5 years, new questions and new issues keep coming. I think it's of the utmost importance to be willing, open, and committed to learning as much as possible about the issues council deals with. I am committed to do just that. And finally, for me personally, it is especially important for differing points of views to be respectfully heard and thoughtfully considered during the decision-making process, and I will strive to take that approach.
Thank you. All right, so now we will start with the questions, and we're going to start with Jack Seal on question 1. And question 1 is, many voters, especially voters on fixed incomes, are concerned about property taxes, which were raised 2 years ago when the city's finances were in worse shape. With property values rising again, should Saline City Council consider lowering the tax rate? Why or why not? And take us through your thinking.
Well, lowering the tax rate is always a consideration, but I do know that during the time that we've just recently passed, city has cut positions, they've eliminated the need, purchasing needed items and so on, and I'm not exactly sure that we're at the point yet where we can cut taxes. Frankly, I'm not that familiar with the current budget. It's been about 4 years since I've been involved in the budget process with the city of Saline. And it would be a learning process, just like Mr. Har said, I think, for each and every issue that comes forward. So I would want to wait and see what the pros and cons are in any budget that's presented, what the alternatives are, how the city would propose spending money before I'd make a decision whether it was wise to either cut taxes or to increase services that have been curtailed in the meantime.
All right. Thank you, Jack. Heidi?
I would agree with that. I think that if we can lower the taxes, I think obviously that's always a good thing. But we need to really look at what kind of cuts have already been made, you know, and where we are. I honestly, you know, would have to have more information about, you know, the situation and what the budget is and what things look like. And if it looked like things made sense to do that, then I certainly would consider that. But I mean, you know, you'd have to have the information at the table to make that decision. So.
All right. Thank you, Heidi. Linda?
Yes, I think it's always worthwhile to consider lowering taxes, but as others have already pointed out, answering this question out of context isn't really possible. We need to look at the entire picture of city services, what citizens value in in their city services, and what we think it's important to provide, and then make our decisions about budgets based on what we feel is most important and critical to do for the city.
All right. Thank you, Linda. Lee?
We need to look strategically at the budget. It's not just a one day or one term item. It's a multi-year thing. Our city needs to grow more because our costs of our infrastructure and our services have been driven up by a fairly small population where we actually could have a larger base and our tax rate could be less for each house. So we need to continuously grow our tax base. Another thing we need to do is we need to look at the difference between essential services and the extra discretionary items. Essential services are pure water, good roads, public safety, and nice neighborhoods, keeping the neighborhoods nice. Other projects, which do drive the taxes up, every time we add something extra, drives the taxes up. Other projects, we should get a response from the public. For example, the Merchant Park right now. Merchant Park, consideration of moving a dumpster from behind Dan's Tavern to behind the Presbyterian Church. If you ask the residents, that may not align with their values in two ways. They might not want to pay that extra. They might want to pay for 10 to 20 extra parking spaces behind Presbyterian, but maybe not that item.
Thanks, Lee. And that finishes question 1. We'll start now with Heidi on question 2. And the question is, with the housing market booming, there are negotiations for a major development west of town, housing development west of town. What approach should the city take to expanding its borders, and what interests must the city protect in doing so?
I think that growth is always a good thing. I don't have, you know, as much information as I'd like about this, you know, that particular situation, but I think that we need to look at what benefit that the housing development can give to the city, and then outweigh that with, you know, the negatives of using, you know, resources and all of those things that are involved with, you know, maintaining that development and that kind of thing. But I think growth is a good thing, and would like to see it. Whether it becomes annexed is a different situation. I don't know. I would have to have more information on that. So.
All right. Thank you, Heidi. Linda?
I think that expansion can be a good thing. Factors that need to be weighed in consideration of any expansion would be, possibly number one on my list, would be looking at the infrastructure stresses that a new development might bring and how those could be funded and handled and planned for. I think that we also need to be very careful about talking about annexation. We have very good neighbors and very good relationships with the surrounding townships, and so any sort of annexation or that would happen would have to be in cooperation and close contact with the township involved.
Thank you, Linda. Lee?
Yeah, I agree that we should expand collaboratively with the township. Expansion would help the schools because the more growth you have in the school population, the more money they get from Lansing. That's good for the schools. The school population has not been moving ahead as fast as they wanted, so they did school of choice to get some extra seats. So number one, I'd like to help the schools. It would also help the city because we would not need to change our resource base very much except water and sewer and the roads in there. And water and sewer can very easily be handled. So I think we're actually moving too slowly on that issue. And it would be very helpful to the city, good for our budgets. It would help to carry the burden and help the school. So I would like to see it change.
Thank you, Lee. Jack?
I know several years back, before the economy took a dive, there was a significant expansion on the boards for the western part of Saline, the western border of Saline, and the southern border of Saline. That would have virtually doubled the city of Saline's size. I think expansion is a good thing. I believe, like Heidi said, that growth has to happen. I think that without it, the city stagnates. However, I think it has to be done very carefully. And I don't think it hurts to do it incrementally. I don't think we need to rush into these things. We need to consider things like the infrastructure, the sewers, and the water structure. And I think that any new development needs to pay their fair share of the cost of expanding the services, the utility services it's going to take to support them. You have to also look at the police department and see if that has any impact on the necessity for police patrols. You also, as a result of my work on the Planning Commission, have to carefully consider the impact of traffic. Coming through town from the west side kind of creates a bottleneck on Michigan Avenue. There's not a lot of good roads. In the past, we worked with the Washtenaw County Road Commission to try and see what can we do to improve the traffic flow in and around the city of Saline. And that kind of died off when the need died off. But I think that all those things need to be looked at. We need to work carefully. We need to work with the community in a collaborative fashion and with the adjacent community. And we need to move forward surely but cautiously.
Okay. Thank you, Jack. And we started with Heidi, so we're on to the next question now. Question 3, we'll start with Linda. And that question is, the city has vacancies downtown, including 147 West Michigan, and also on the east end of town and the west end of town. What role, if any, should the city council take in bringing business to town?
City council in particular. I think there's a tension here. We would love all to go out and recruit businesses left and right to come into the city. We'd also like to recruit developers to come and develop property. The truth is, we're government of the city of Saline, and we are not private property owners. And all of the properties you mentioned that need perhaps more businesses or need development are private property and not directly speaking under our control. What I do think City Council can do is create an atmosphere in the city where business and development is, business people and developers know that they are welcome and that we are eager to talk with them and that the city is eager to work with them in creating new business opportunities in the community.
All right. Thank you, Linda. Lee?
Saline Main Street, the city partners with Saline Main Street, and Saline Main Street as one of its 4 areas has repurposing parts of structures and buildings, and also in doing things like this recruiting. I think the mayor is the spokesperson for the city of Saline that would have the right capacity to go in and work with Saline Main Street when there's a visitor or something like that. A lot of this is done through collaboration between Saline Main Street and brokers. It's not essentially the government's position to recruit and bring in somebody to a particular place, but sometimes there's something we can do to facilitate it or to help. So, but I think the mayor would be the right person to do that.
All right, thank you, Lee. Jack?
I think that I agree greatly with Linda. It's not the role of the city of Saline itself to go out and recruit people to occupy empty businesses. The role of the city of Saline, I believe, is to provide a great infrastructure that attracts people to want to come to the city of Saline, to work here, to live here, and to recreate here. I think that if we keep the roads in good shape, we provide good utility service, reliable utility service, and if we provide a community that feels free to go about their business without fear of crime, I think we establish a place where people are attracted and they want to come, not only to live, but to work. I agree with Lee too. I think that the city fathers themselves, the council, the mayor, need to work with and collaborate with, and to the extent that it's feasible and appropriate, cooperate with the downtown business groups that exist. There's Main Street, I think there's a Downtown Business Association, there's probably a West Side Business Association, there's several of those. And I think we need to give them a good ear, and where we can, help.
Thank you, Jack. Heidi?
Again, I would agree with those statements that everyone's kind of made, but I think it's really important that City Council can foster an attitude of community, and just by the things that that we as individuals do, as well as what the city can do. I think it's important to have a dynamic city, so you know, the policies and all of that can set that forth, and also welcoming, something that so that the developers know that we're a welcoming place, and you know, willing to work with people to let them have their business, you know, have their businesses here. I really like what the mayor's doing right now currently, and I think that it's great for City Council to support that. Would be that he's meeting with the business owners, doing, you know, West Side business meetings and Saline Main Street, and you know, all of the sort of subgroups that are part of the city. So.
All right, thank you very much. All right, so now we move on to our next question, and we're going to start this question with Lee. And this question is, tell us about a strength of the city of Saline that the city can build on, and also a list of weakness where you think improvements can be made.
Well, one strength is that the city has really great schools. They've got a great football team right now too. The city also is seen as a very attractive city for residential purposes. It's seen as, it was named as the best place to raise a kid in Michigan. It's just a nice city with nice neighborhoods. One place that we could change and improve is to repurpose and change with the times. We have industrial parks that are called industrial parks. I think they should be called something like Ann Arbor Saline Business Park or something like that. They should look more to office-type buildings and less to industrial. Industry has moved to China and Mexico and so forth. Industry in the U.S. dropped from 17% to 11% of the GDP. Industry is slowly growing in Saline, but having so much of an orientation to industrial parks. Also, the personal property tax was taken away from the cities so that in the future we won't have that same support from industry. So we need to repurpose.
Thank you, Lee. Jack?
The city of Saline already has a great foundation on which to build. They have an excellent city staff. They provide good city services. They take pretty good care of the roads, given the budget limitations that exist right now and so on. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a weakness, but I think it's a weakness if you allow it to be. And that is, I think that we need to adopt an attitude of continuous improvement. The Japanese have a word for it, they call it Kaizen. And that means no matter how good you're doing, you can always do a better job tomorrow. And I think that's one place that we could look to seek to improve. And that is to impress upon our staff that no matter how good you think you are, you can do a better job. You can be more helpful to the citizens that come to you for your assistance. You can do a better job of breaking down some of the perceived barriers that exist when people come to government looking for help.
Thank you, Jack. Heidi?
Yeah, I think Saline does a lot of things well, but I think the sense of community, and that encompasses with the schools and the businesses and the events and all of the Summerfest and all of those kind of things. And I think while it's doing that, it also has its eye on the international, right? And I think that it has its eye on the business. And I got to photograph Liebherr with their grand opening for their new plant that they're building. And so I think there is industry, and I think there's, and we can draw that and keep that here. I think that's great. Where I think we maybe need a little bit of improvement, again, I think there's always room for improvement in everything, and I agree with Jack, but is our culture and our arts and our art culture. I sit on the Arts and Culture Commission, and then we do a lot of work there, but I'm always wanting to see more of that, which will also help to draw more people to town as well, and just one small place where we can up the ante a little bit, I guess.
Thank you, Heidi. Linda?
Yes, I think I've jotted several notes on a couple of things, but I would say I think Saline's greatest strength is its people, and I mean that. By that I mean both city staff as well as citizens. And we have a very experienced, dedicated staff in the city that's really committed to doing excellent work for all of us. And we also have citizens in our community who are deeply, deeply committed to the well-being of the city. And I think anything we do to build on that and expand that is all too good for all of us. In weaknesses, I could mention a few things, but I think, and I agree with what's already been brought up, I would add to that we have not done, as a city council, at least as good a job as I think we should do in looking ahead and planning for our financial future. There are some financial challenges ahead of us down the road, 5, 10, 15 years, and we have started to get a handle on that and try to understand that, and I think that's really important to keep doing, to have a plan to avoid some of the pitfalls that may be ahead of us.
Thank you, Linda. All right, so now we go with our next question here, and this question will start with Jack. Does Saline have a parking problem downtown? And if so, how should the city solve it? Specifically, do you support chalking tires and giving out tickets? And would you support the acquisition of property to increase the amount of parking places downtown?
The reason parking regulations exist is to ensure the turnover of parking places so that businesses can remain viable by getting customers in and out of their stores. And doctors and everybody else who does business in the city of Saline. Given that there's a viable reason for having parking regulations in place, I think enforcement is appropriate. Of course, that comes from my background as a police officer from some 40 years. But I do sincerely believe that if you have regulations without enforcement, you're not going to have any kind of compliance. After a while, people soon remember that things aren't being done to enforce the law. So I believe that parking tickets are appropriate. Do we need to buy additional places to park? I'm not sure that we do. I can drive around the city most times and see vacant areas. There's a place right across from Linda's house. It's a 24-hour parking lot that rarely has any cars parked in there. It's only a block and a half or 2 blocks from downtown. It's not a great walk, not a tremendous walk. If you want to walk a block or 2 in this town, you can find a place to park almost anywhere. So I don't think that buying additional property for those events that only occur once or twice a year that bring a lot of people into the community would be worthwhile.
Thank you, Jack. Heidi?
Yeah, I don't think that the Saline's resources are best spent giving out parking tickets. I know there's an issue, and I understand that, we have employees parking and we need, turnover for some of the businesses, but also the handing out parking tickets is deterring people from coming or staying in those businesses. So I would rather see our resources used some other way. But as far as additional parking, I don't think it's necessary. I mean, if you go to Ann Arbor and you find a parking space, even at our farthest parking spot, you're thinking it's your lucky day. So, there, like Jack said, there are plenty of open parking spaces, and being a citizen of the downtown area, I know that there's plenty of places to park down my road, and the underutilized parking lot that's down where Linda lives. So I don't think that that's necessary.
Thank you, Heidi. Linda?
So parking is one of those issues that everyone believes they are an expert in, and none of us in this room is an expert about parking. And I have been strongly advocating for the last several months that the city needs to bring in someone who really knows about parking, or consultants who really know about parking and how to manage parking and how to determine needs and define those needs and meet those needs. So I'm not in favor of buying more property to put in a parking lot until some expert convinces me with real research and real evidence that that is what the city needs to do. I think there may be other options. I think parking is not a simple thing. One of my council colleagues, Mr. Rhodes, sent us all a couple of months ago a brochure about how to do parking simply. It's something like 34 pages, single-spaced. There is no simple answer to parking, and I really think we need expert help. And since everyone has, so far as mentioned, the parking lot in front of my house, I will say that I have threatened at times in the parking discussion to put up a Facebook page for that parking lot and post a picture every hour on the hour of how empty it is.
All right. Thank you, Linda. Lee?
Well, Jeff Speck in the Walkable City has a quote. He says, "Parking is destiny. You must get parking and you must build it in." He also says that missing teeth, parking lots that create missing teeth, like the gap between Alan Grossman's office, where the farmer's market is on the weekend. That gap on South Ann Arbor should be filled in. So, and here in Saline, I've seen in many communities that you have to acquire property while it's available. You have to do it before it's gone. So, I've seen about 6 or more parking studies in Saline, and they've all said the same thing. They've said the parking behind the Presbyterian Church and Chamber of Commerce in that area is where the stress is on parking. So what I would do is I would fill in the street right next to Alan Grossman's building. I would buy that used car building behind the Presbyterian Church and put in about 15 parking spots. I would buy the back third of the open pit where Steve Dodge used to be and reserve that for parking. Parking is destiny. Do it while you can.
All right, thank you, Lee. All right, and this is my last question before we take questions from the public. And if anybody in the public still has a question they'd like to ask, there are cards on each of the tables over there, and you can write down your question and bring it over here. And we'll try to get in as many as we can before we wrap up tonight. So the last question, we'll start with Heidi, right? Okay. Public transit is just down Michigan Avenue in Pittsfield Township. Buses are running from Pittsfield to Meyer and to Ann Arbor. Do you support joining the AATA and paying to bring the ride, the bus services, to Ann Arbor or to Saline?
I actually don't at this time. For the information that I know there was talk about it last year at City Council, and I wasn't at all of the meetings or didn't hear all of the information, but I don't see that it would be utilized enough to outweigh the cost. If someone could show me that it would be, that we'd have more than a handful of people using it, then maybe I would change my position on that, but I don't see the cost outweighing the benefits at this point of it. I would rather see our resources be put into non-motorized pathways that could get people maybe to the east side of town to take a bus if they wanted to take a bus. I just don't see the cost outweigh the benefits.
All right, thank you, Heidi. Linda?
Yes, I'm encouraged by the fact that public transit is creeping the AATA transit is creeping ever closer to Saline's borders. And I think it's important to bear in mind, we are currently spending money on public transit in Saline. We fund, or partially fund, the services provided to members of the Saline community through by the People's Express service. And that has served us quite well. There could be many improvements, I think we all would agree. And we have already, in partnership with with support of AATA, People's Express has had grant funding provided that has added another bus to the service. So I think that's an important first step. I think that we should continue to spend money on public transit as we are now, potentially expanding it, but I'm not sure about in what way. But I do think that it would be best for us to be in partnership with the ride and to tie in, perhaps replace People's Express or tie People's Express more into the AATA services so that we get better integration.
All right, thank you, Linda. Lee?
I don't think the AATA could replace People's Express because People's Express is a point-to-point and not a fixed route. There was a fixed route that was attempted maybe 15 years ago. We got like 2 riders a day, or 6 riders a day, or something like that. A lot of the buses were empty, were looping empty. So I am in favor of the federal government dollars supporting mass transit and underwriting it for probably more than half if the fares will make up the difference and the market works, the free market works. So if there are enough people that want to use those buses and so forth, I'm not against trying it, but I just don't think that it would be worth extra tax dollars or increasing people's taxes for that purpose. People's Express is very flexible, goes everywhere. I like that.
Thank you, Lee. Jack?
People's Express, if you call them in advance, they will give you a ride within the city for a cost of $2, and outside the city, within their limited range, for $3. That's pretty affordable, I think. if you bring those AAATA buses into this town, they're huge. We don't have bus stops built to accommodate those buses. They will have to stop in the road, not to block traffic. I don't care how fuel efficient they are, or how much they lack emissions. They're still a big hindrance to the effective traffic control in the city. Like Mr. Burgoyne said, when they were here before, they had very little ridership. They were here a number of years ago, so they discontinued the service for that reason. So at this time, I'd have to be convinced of the need in a way that I have not seen to date to convince me that we ought to try and bring AAATA into this community beyond our, maybe the idea down here at this end of the table about trying to integrate the People's Express with one of the existing AAATA routes might be a great one. But I don't want to bring those big buses into this community at this time.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, so now we're going to go to some of these questions from the audience here today. And you're going to have to bear with me a little bit because some of these questions I'm going to be reading for the first time, and my eyesight's going too. So. All right, so this question we're going to start with Heidi. Or wait, no, we're going to start with Linda. Sorry about that. We've kind of touched on this before, but does Saline have a long-term plan for growth and development, perhaps a 5-year plan? What is it and how should it be implemented? We've kind of, I know we kind of covered that a little bit there, but is there anything else on growth or long-term plans that you guys wanted to answer on this question?
Well, I will say the city does have a master plan, and it is you can read the master plan on the city website, and the city is also has defined for itself the requirement that that master plan be updated incrementally and worked on every year. So there is currently work starting on doing that again, on reviewing that.
Thank you. Hey, did you have anything else you wanted?
Yes, I was going to refer to both the master plan and the city infrastructure and its cost. Right now, we have 9,000 to 10,000 population. Our infrastructure can actually serve 15 to 20,000 population. If you get beyond 15,000 into 20, Jack named a whole bunch of good things. You know, you have to look at transportation, you have to look at all the changes the change of population does and where it is and so forth. But we do benefit right now, and the schools greatly benefit right now from more student count and more population. We can become more effective. We can go back towards lower taxes and have the same good services. So, you know, we have a master plan in the general thought, but I think what really is telling is that the school is not full, they need more money from Lansing, and the city infrastructure, except for water and sewer, is not full, and make the developers pay for water and sewer. That's it easy.
Thank you, Lee. Jack, did you have anything else you wanted to add to?
I do. Like Linda alluded to, there is a master plan that the city updates every 5 years. Not only do we have a master plan, we have a recreation master plan, and we have a, I think it's a transportation? Non-motorized, thank you. Non-motorized master plan. And those are both in the process of being updated right now with the city's master plan. So those lay a framework for how the city is going to look, how it's going to operate, how those particular entities are going to develop into the future. We also have a zoning map, and that too helps give us guidance on the planning part, how we ought to proceed. I guess one thing I'd make an appeal to the public, there are going to be some public meetings with this master planning effort going forth, and we usually get a fair response. I would encourage people to come out if they see, when they see that this is going to take place. It's usually right here in this building, and it's put on by Doug Lewan and Carlotta Wortman, professional planning organization. And they usually do a pretty good job. They lay out ideas, and it's an opportunity for everyone to participate in planning for the future of the city.
Thanks, Jack. Heidi, was there anything else you want to say?
Nothing much to add, just again, I think it's very important, and obviously the city's already addressing it with the master plan. I know I've been at the last couple meetings and it's been being discussed, and even at the Arts and Culture Commission level and other committees and stuff, it's already been handled, and definitely keeping a long-term plan. I think, just to address a little bit about the schools, the schools have, we're not just in the city with the schools, so the schools are partly the township, so I don't know that bringing that in helps or doesn't help, but just wanted to say that.
All right, thank you, Heidi. Some of these questions are a little bit direct, so I'm going to try to work with them here. This question here is, what are your ideas for the location of a new sewer plant? Now, I don't think that's ever actually been totally approved yet. I know that it was actually kind of brought up a little bit at the recent city council meeting by Bob Scull, but it's hard to say how to frame this question. But would you support? Do you think there's a place where we need to be putting the sewer plant where it's not already at? Should we be moving this?
Well,
And we'll start with Lee on this one.
Yeah. With additional growth, we need additional capacity of water and sewer. With water, we have an agreement with the schools to get some of our water from this area, right here, Liberty School. With sewer, you actually need expansion or to make your plant more efficient. These are things that you look at over a long period of time. I don't have an answer up front for that.
Yeah, it's a little, I know it's far down the road and a long way from a decision being made there, but Jack, did you want to say anything about this?
The only thing I would say is that I think that to uproot the existing sewer plant and relocate it somewhere would be a hugely expensive undertaking, and of course it would be borne by the taxpayers of the city and the users of the services. So I don't know that that's reasonable. I know that there have been some real difficulties, it seems, of late with some of the neighboring folks there with the smell that's been generated, but I believe that's being looked at by the city. And there's active work going on right now to try and remediate what happens there. Maybe in the future, you might want to develop like a substation somewhere that would be in an area that might be remote, but I think that's a long way off and a lot of planning from now.
Right. Heidi?
I would agree with that. I think, we can't really say without having some of the other questions answered first, whether or not that would be necessary. Having said that, I do live kind of across the street from the existing plant, and there are smells, but I have been at the city council meetings the last few times, and there's renovations happening and things happening to kind of address those, hopefully. But I'm all for that, because obviously I live in that neighborhood and it doesn't smell so nice.
Linda?
Yes, I think it's not wrong to ask the question and to think about the possibilities. Theoretically, yes, it would be very costly, but if we have additional development coming to the city, part of figuring out how that development would be managed has to do with infrastructure, and we need to look seriously, I think, at what are options to enhance the wastewater treatment plant to be able to handle any extra capacity and also to improve the current conditions. So I wouldn't take that question off the table, but I don't have a yes or no answer.
All right. Thank you, Linda. This question is about Merchant Park. Now the question is, on the card here, what is the timetable for the parking lot 1 in Merchant Park for this year? It's almost October. So I guess it's kind of following along this question a little bit, and we're just going to start with Jack here. What do you think of the Merchant Park development, or the plans that were put forth for Merchant Park, and what would be the advantage to the city for having a place like that downtown?
I think Main Street, Saline, is all about placemaking in the city, and I think that's the key effort behind this Merchant Park proposal that's on the table. I'm on the planning commission, and we have not seen any of the detail on that. We have, as a matter of fact, one of the parishioners at the Presbyterian Church come to our last planning commission meeting and raise protest about what's going on, and I redirected that person to city council, where I hope to be soon, but I'm not now. So I don't really know. I have not seen any of the specific plans. I don't know what the timetable is. I know that it's kind of been moving along slowly. I don't know.
Hi.
Yeah, I can kind of speak to that a little bit because I am on the Saline design team, and we were brought the Merchants Park kind of project because the city was going to have to do some renovations to that site anyway because the bricks are coming up and it was dangerous and people had fallen, and so they were going to spend some money to do some work on it anyway, and Main Street came in and said, you know, how can we make this better? How can we make this a place that people kind of want to be in the city, which coming into the city, doing some activities, that kind of thing. When we did not realize with the church the issues there, and I think they've been brought to the council at this point, and now I don't know for sure, but that it's being addressed. I think the safety is going to be a number, obviously that was kind of the inkling for it in the first place, and now with this additional problem that needs to be addressed. But I do think it's important to have space in the city to do those kind of things, but also we need to be responsible about how we spend the money for this, for this area. So.
All right, thank you, Heidi. Linda.
I will say my understanding of the project is that it began with the city's contractual obligation in the lease agreement. The city leases that area for $1 a year from the property owner, and part of our contractual obligation there is to maintain the safety and viability of that space and just keep it up to date and safe. And so the discussion started, as I recall, there, and then design elements came in, and then additional considerations were brought in. So the project has grown in not necessarily a disciplined or focused way. And I believe, from the point of view of participating in this process in City Council, that we haven't kept very good track of all of the details. And in my opinion, not everyone on council agrees with me about this, but in my opinion, we should have recognized, for example, earlier than we did, that we needed to consult with the Presbyterian Church about their reactions to what we were considering. And as far as I know, the only timetable we have right now is for information to come back about what the conceptual suggestions might cost, but there's no timetable for actual construction or implementation.
All right, thank you, Linda. Lee.
Well, I'm also on the Main Street design team, and when this came before the team, the last time it came, I raised the objection about moving the trash from Dan's Tavern over to the Presbyterian area. And I did this because I think any congregation that establishes a peaceful garden and is trying to develop a church area would not find this compatible. And I think that, trash should stay near the bar and not at the church. So it seems that if you ask the community out there, does the average taxpayer want to pay $75 more or so on their tax and $50 more or whatever it's going to be for the average taxpayer to move the trash from here over to the church and to repair the ground bricks and so forth? They would say no. The other thing I have an issue with is I don't think we should be leasing that space for $1 a year. When you lease a space, you take over the insurance liability for it. It's not ours, we don't own it. I think we should take that money and develop 10 or 15 parking spaces behind the Presbyterian Church in the area that all of the studies of parking have shown is needed, and stop the ticketing and only pull cars overnight in the early morning. Stop the daytime ticketing, give more parking.
Thank you, Lee. Jeff, did we already ask you this question?
We did.
All right. We had another question here about Merchants Park, which is, I think is very, very similar to the last one. So we'll go on to the next question here, which will start with Heidi. And this question is, and I'm going to ask the question first, and then I'm going to try to, I might sort of rephrase it a little bit and keep in mind both questions, if you will. But the question here is, what % of the city's budget should be spent on the downtown? Now that's, I think that'd be kind of a difficult question for anybody to answer, unless you, well, maybe Lee could, because
Yeah.
he's the finance director.
Yeah, the downtown has,
Wait.
Oh.
This one actually starts with
Oh,
Heidi. I
sorry.
believe. So, I think in general, I think there has been some concern about, it's been mentioned on council, at the council table about favoritism for downtown. I mean, that's been a criticism, whereas other people say that downtown needs to be, you have to invest in downtown and create these places to have an attractive, vibrant city with things going on. So I guess, do you agree with the
I don't know that we could
spending
give,
more on?
I don't know that we could give a number to it necessarily. I mean, maybe we can, but I couldn't at this point with the information that I have. But I do think that there's a balance. I think that you need to have a vibrant downtown. Obviously, I believe in that. I'm a Main Street volunteer, and I think that without the downtown, people won't come to town necessarily, or they won't have as many reasons to come to town. So I think the downtown is important. But I also think that the other areas of town need to be addressed as well. I think the west side, the east side, making sure that we don't have big gaps in things that make people like drive through those gaps and then, oh yeah, we're here in a great downtown, but you had to drive through all this, empty space to get there. I think they work together, and in an ideal situation, they should be working together to both be vibrant places, one feeding off the other and vice versa.
All right, Linda.
Yes, I agree with what Heidi said. I think that it is true that we talk about downtown as an entity, and we have it very carefully defined because that is one of the requirements of the Main Street program. So the Main Street program has very definite boundaries. And I also know that the Main Street people would love to see those boundaries expanded and still are trying to do so, although it's difficult. The definitions are pretty rigid, apparently. I do believe that having a vibrant downtown benefits the whole community, and I would love to see more integration of the east side and the west side with downtown and activities. One of the ideas that I've had that since we are in favor of public transit, no one will support, perhaps except me and Mr. Rhodes, is I would love to see a shuttle bus that ran from the shopping center that formerly held Country Market all the way down to Mickey's Dairy Twist, or maybe a little bit further west, and that you could park your car on one end of town or the other and hop on the shuttle and stop anywhere in town along the way, and do what you needed to do, go shopping. I'm, getting older. I anticipate the day where someday I may not be able to drive anymore. I'd like to still be able to live in Saline and get around town even if I can't drive.
Thank you, Linda. Lee.
Well, the defined downtown area is about 2% of the value of the city on the books. It's more important than 1/50th of the city, but it's not as important as every other neighborhood. I think one way to look at it is to ask the community what their values are on projects that go beyond essential services. Essential services downtown are to keep the crossings safe, to have correct parking, to have good sidewalks, to have your flowers and so forth. Your basics of the downtown. The discretionary projects are things like Merchants Park and anything else that pops up that's a dollar value that goes beyond the basics. So I think we should think of it in two ways. We should do all of the essentials, And then we should ask the citizens, do they want to raise their taxes by X amount to do whatever, or don't they agree with the project or so forth. But I like the idea of doing a really good job on all of our essential services and then seeking input on community values.
Thanks, Lee. Jack?
That's a very good answer. I was going to say that if you look at the budget broadly, virtually everything in the budget enhances everything that goes on in town. Police protection, sewer and water service, fire protection, everything enhances every element of the community. I will say, though, that in the Planning Commission, it's often occurred to me when we've looked at zoning maps and things like that, and master plans, we have 3 separate pockets, just like Glenn said. We have an east side, we have a west side, we have the hub of downtown. And I don't know why we haven't done more. I've always argued that we need to have more ability to walk safely on the north side of Michigan Avenue to the west side of town. As a matter of fact, that west side of town used to be called Barnegat. It used to be a separate community, and it was separated by the river. Linda's idea about having some kind of a transit that would go up and down between connecting the community, or these 3 separate sections of town, I think is a good one. We need to do something, because to get to either the east side of town or the west side of town, you usually have to jump in a car to get there. So they're kind of segregated from the rest of the community. And there ought to be a way to tie that together better, whether it's with non-motorized transportation opportunities or whatever. I'm not sure at this time, but it does need closer inspection.
All right. Thank you, Jack. All right, and this time we'll start with Linda, and the question is, what do you perceive the most pressing issues are for the city of Saline?
In the near term, I would say infrastructure issues are very pressing. We're all aware of the inability of our legislators in Lansing to come to any sort of solution to the problem of funding roads. We are in Saline coming to the end of our road funding that we have available. And there's no real solution in sight from Lansing, so that's a big issue that we'll have to deal with. Longer term, I would say, I would go back to what I mentioned before, and that is the financial challenges, recognizing and understanding the financial challenges that are facing us down the road 5 or 10 years, the kinds of things that everyone's attention was called to in Detroit. Now, of course, we're not Detroit, but we have some of the same long-term financing problems with retirees, pensions, healthcare issues, and we need to get a good handle on what those are and start working to solve them.
Thank you, Linda. Lee?
Last year, I had a page of 27 ways to improve services, help the schools, and lower the taxes. And those elements are present. One of them is making our MERS costs more predictable and lower into the future. And we have an opportunity to do that through bonding. That continue, and we have the opportunity through the end of this year. So we should address that. Another is restructuring and looking towards the future, and it can be fairly short term. For example, Sauk Trail Industrial Park could have better uses related to Michigan Avenue. And I think we should have community forums and feedback to discuss that. We should say, we believe that some industries will gradually, incrementally grow, like Bleed Hair, for example, that bought 70 acres, and they're going to fill in a fourth of that soon, and they'll progressively grow. But in many other locations, we have to reorient ourselves towards the future. And I think we should do that as soon as possible. We should grow, help the schools, help ourselves.
Thank you, Lee. Jack?
My fear is that with property values rising, with tax revenues going up again, and a perception that things are easing, that we take our eye off the ball. I think we need to really pay attention to finances. We can't let that slip, we can't let that go, but yet we still have to be good stewards of the money we have. We have to spend it effectively and efficiently to provide the kind of city service that the citizens of the city of Saline want and expect. And I think that's the real challenge right now, is trying to say, although things are easing, we still need to proceed cautiously, proceed with due deliberation, but proceed cautiously and not spend profitably.
All right, thank you, Jack. Heidi?
Yeah, I mean, I think the real pressing issue, if you're talking really immediately, is maintaining what's going to happen with Michigan Ave being all under construction and making sure that people are still getting their services and being able to walk around town safely and get to their businesses and their customers to get to their businesses, that kind of thing. And then also, you know, a little bit later down the road, but what the road situations will look like after that's over with, as far as Ann Arbor Saline and Henry Street and the financing, like Linda was talking about, for those things that are going to need to be done once that project is over with. And then again, I think just being responsible with those decisions and what the money situations are. So.
Thank you, Heidi. All right, this next question, we're down to two, I believe, here. Two remaining, and they're both kind of statements. So I'm going to kind of read them and maybe pose a question at the end of them. Well, this one is kind of a question here. At work meetings, I don't know, you guys, I think, have all seen city council work meetings, but at work meetings, city council sits with tables in a circle, and it is hard for the public citizens to hear proceedings. Can you put those tables in a row or use the city council table for these work meetings? This is, but I think that there's a question here about public accessibility to these meetings, and I know at the same time, these work meetings are supposed to be held for council to work face-to-face as a team. So does anybody want to jump in here? And I think we start with Lee this time.
Yeah, I think that we need to have open and accessible government, which means we need to have our information out to the public. I think that informal votes are votes, myself. If you go to a work meeting and, you know, informally everybody agrees yes or no, and then you go to the regular meeting that's televised, and all of a sudden stuff comes up and everybody is like mind control. Everybody says yes all at once, you know, no discussion. I think that votes should be recorded when votes are happening. And if it happens in a work meeting, I think you should record the vote there. I think you should orient yourself towards the public. I think you should be open to the public. Work meetings are not as publicly known. You don't keep detailed minutes and so forth. I'd like to move towards being more open and more accessible.
Thank you, Lee. Jack?
Just as a matter of personal preference, I've been to several work sessions of late. I came to several involving the Michigan Avenue project. I was kind of dismayed to see the arrangement that this person talks about, because there are a number of people with their backs to me that were addressing issues and ideas and things that I wanted to be involved in. And I got to tell you very frankly, as I'm getting older, my hearing is getting less and less acute. And I find it very helpful now to be able to see the face of the person who's speaking. And I don't know whether I've acquired a partial ability to read lips or not, but it's much easier for me to understand when I can face the person speaking. So just from a purely personal point of view, I'd like to see them at the council table so I can see them all as they're talking.
All right, thank you, Jack. Heidi?
Yeah, I agree. I think, I mean, there's reason for people being in a round table because it's easier for them to see each other, but we're a government body that needs to be working with the people and be open and making sure that people can hear and people could see if you need to see something. So I think that's a pretty easy solution to fix, especially if there's people there that need to see those things. So.
Thank you. Linda?
Well, I will speak in favor, somewhat, in favor of the current setup by starting out and saying one of my biggest frustrations about sitting at the council bench is that I cannot see my fellow council members when we're having a discussion. So it may be that the way we set up the tables for work meetings, which are very conducive and very helpful for me, from my point of view, in facilitating discussion and getting true dialogue going on. Maybe there's a middle ground. Maybe there's a different way we could arrange the tables that would allow members of the public who are at the meeting, those few who come, to see and hear us while we discuss. And I think better microphones would also help in that effort. So I think it's a balance, but I would really not want to see work meetings held with council members sitting at the bench and not able to look each other in the eye.
All right. Thank you, Linda. And I think that's everybody for this question. We have one question remaining here, and again, this one is kind of a statement. Please address the present dispatch system. A friend called 911 and was referred to Washtenaw County and then transferred. This caused her concern in the delay of response to an emergency. So I guess the question here, I don't know, there is no question here, but there's kind of a statement. I would say that police dispatch has been an issue with, potential consolidation considered in the last few years. Do you think the dispatch system in Saline can operate on its own and maintain safe public service? Yes, this one would start with Jack.
Well, I have a lot of experience in that field, and I am currently still involved in the whole idea of radios and public safety in Washtenaw County. Under the current system, let me first address that statement. The 911 calls are not very scientifically directed at this point. If you're calling on a cell phone especially, those 911 calls go into a cell face on a tower, and they do an approximation of where you might be, and they direct it to the nearest police agency. So we have some towers on the periphery of our city, and this explanation may go well beyond 90 seconds. But depending on which face of that tower, some of those calls get directed to the city of Saline, and the actual person making the call is not in the jurisdiction of the Saline Police Department, so that call does need to be transferred. They try to do it with all speed and expeditious. They have, push-button phones that they can directly transfer the call, and sometimes it does lead to a delay. To answer the other question that you asked about how do I feel about dispatch in Saline, I think dispatch is a reflection of the community where it exists, and I think that people get what you pay for. We could go to a combined dispatch, but frankly, if you get swallowed up by Washtenaw County, you're not going to have the same level of service, the same degree of familiarity with the city and the people as you do by having your own dispatch in the cities.
All right, thank you, Jack. Heidi?
Yeah, I will just defer to Jack's beginning part of that because he knows what he's talking about. But I agree with keeping the dispatch in Saline. I mean, I know that it's so nice to have it right there. I know my son one time called 911 on accident, and the policeman was at our door within, I think, 2 minutes, and he was like, "I'm in trouble." But I mean, just to have that right down the road, someone there that can help you, I think is so important. So I think I'm for keeping it in Saline.
Thank you, Heidi. Linda?
Yeah, like Heidi, I'm not at all qualified to comment on the specifics of that example. I do know from the discussions of dispatch that we've had in the past that in the current technological environment with cell phones and phone service at home provided by Comcast or landlines, that the dispatch picture is not a simple one. It's not as simple as it used to be. So it is very complicated. And on the subject of whether our dispatch system is viable for us, I think that it was very clear in the community discussion that took place the last time we talked about dispatch, that having a locally based dispatch service in Saline is a very, very high priority for many people in this community. And so I think that's a very good reason to keep it the way it is.
Thank you, Linda. Lee?
Yeah, in our review of dispatch, we learned that if a call goes over to Washtenaw County, they have a very high volume. They don't have the familiarity, and the call is prioritized so that it may wait. It might not wait if it's a murder, but for other things it might wait. So you get better service locally. What's the answer? The answer is that we have infrastructure that doesn't have enough people supporting it. We need to grow as a city, and with the incremental growth, the tax per taxpayer will decrease because more people will be paying a share of the pie. The answer is not to get rid of dispatch in Saline. The answer is to have a proper tax base.
All right, thank you very much. And that is all the questions we have from the public today. So we're going to wrap this up with individual comments, closing remarks from the candidates. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to give closing remarks, and then we'll wrap it up. And we're going to start it off with Heidi.
I will keep it short because I know you guys probably want to go home, but I just want to thank everybody for coming and listening to us this evening, and I'm looking forward to, if I am elected, being of service to all of you and providing what I can provide as far as my ideas and opinions towards making Saline even greater than it is.
Thank you. Linda?
Yes, thank you. First, I want to say thanks to Tran and to Saline Community Television Network for making this possible, and thanks to those people who actually came and saw us in person, and also those who will take the time to see us either on SCTN or on Vimeo. I had thought I would tell you a story about something that happened to me this year as a city council member, but I think I will just keep it also short and simple, and conclude with the sentence that I ended my opening statement with, and that is, for me personally, it is critically important for differing points of view to be respectfully heard and thoughtfully considered during the decision-making process, and I am deeply committed to doing that.
Thank you, Linda. Lee?
Well, in summary, my goals are open government and lower taxes. I think we should help the schools deliver, we should deliver essential services, and we should also seek community feedback. After having raised our kids here, my wife and I want to see the best possible school and the best possible city. I can also tell you that people like Jack and Jim and Dean and Dave and Linda, who I've worked with, are really good people. Not my neighbor, I haven't worked with her. And I enjoyed the discussions, and the discussions are productive. And Linda's orientation is 100% correct. You know, you should respectfully put out your ideas. You should look to the future. You should look to change with the future. Try to help the city better. Yeah.
Thanks, Lee. Jeff?
I guess I'd just like to say that I come to the table here with about 43 years of local government service with the city of Saline, the city of Ann Arbor, and Washtenaw County. In those years, I've seen a lot of government workings, and I think I have a pretty fair understanding of how it operates. I've served as a cop on the street, I've served as a sergeant, as a supervisor, I've served as an administrator, I've served on commissions, I've served on city council. I think I have a breadth of experience that would allow me to approach the job in a manner that is sort of enriched by those past experiences. I'll also say that my wife, Pam, and I have lived in this community for 40 years. Our children, too, enjoyed an excellent education in the school system. My son goes on to stay to be an educator. Our daughter is an accountant. They're both very successful, and they both have good families. We're thankful for the kind of upbringing and the kind of things they experienced here in this community. And I'd like to do my part to ensure that that continues going forward.
All right, thank you very much, Jack. So that's it for us here today. I'd like to thank everyone in the audience here who attended, and everyone who submitted questions too. I would also like to thank anybody who's watching at home or who will be watching at home. And also, thanks to SCTN for being here today and recording this and broadcasting this. And lastly, thanks to the candidates for putting up with all my questions and emails and making this happen. Thank you and have a good night.
Thank you for your